for joining us. The Washington State PASS team has put a series of videos together to help PASS students learn essential writing skills as PASS students complete their courses. In this video, we'll highlight tips to avoid common punctuation errors. Let's get started. What are some common punctuation errors writers make?
The first error that we're going to look at is the use of apostrophes. So when using apostrophes, they are used for showing possession, and we want to make sure that we're doing it correctly. So, for example, it is the student's desk. Notice it's one student, so it's apostrophe S. If you are looking at multiple students, then you simply add an apostrophe after the S. Don't add an additional S. And then names, like a student's name, if it ends with an S, simply add an apostrophe. This is Jesus's history book. It belongs to him. So add the apostrophe, don't add an additional S.
That was really helpful to learn how to use apostrophes when it comes to possession for one person, singular, more than one person, plural, or with names that end with S. What other common mistakes do you see with the use of apostrophes?
Apostrophes in calendar years. I see this all the time in student work. You don't just add an apostrophe or when you're talking about years. I grew up in the 1960s. You just add the S afterwards. I grew up in the 1960s with an apostrophe S is incorrect.
Got it. So we should never use an apostrophe when writing out the calendar year. Is there anything else you can tell us about apostrophes?
Apostrophes and contractions. I don't let my students use contractions in their writing because it's slang. We speak using contractions, but when we write, we should spell them out. And by spelling them out, they're going to avoid a lot of those errors that they make using contraction or using apostrophes. So a contraction is simply one word that it's made up of two words where a letter has been left out and the apostrophe is used to replace the letter or letters that have been removed. The only time you would see contractions is when a student is writing dialogue, and dialogue will be the way we speak. So they could write using contractions in the dialogue, but then the body of the paper would not use contractions. So these are just a few. There are more, but these are a few examples of contractions that are commonly used. Spell them out. So should not, could not, cannot, do not, will not, and it is. Make sure cannot is one word. Okay, all the others are two words.
So it sounds like avoiding the use of contractions in formal papers is the best thing to do. And if you are going to use contractions when you're showing dialogue or somebody speaking, that's okay. Just make sure the apostrophe goes in the right place. Thank you for that tip. What other common punctuation errors do you see when you review writing assignments?
Some common errors with using commas are students tend to want to connect sentences with a comma instead of putting a period or using comma and. So what they need to know is why you can't use that comma. And so students need to know that an independent clause is a noun and a verb that create a complete thought. A dependent clause also contains a noun and a verb, but it doesn't create a complete thought. So if you can connect an independent clause with a dependent clause with a comma, what you can't do is connect two independent clauses with a comma. So we're going to give you a few examples here. I loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I is the noun and loved is the verb. The sentence makes complete sentence by itself. When I was a kid, that is a dependent clause. So I is the noun and was is the verb, but it doesn't make sense by itself. It needs an independent clause to make sense. So when I was a kid, comma, I loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and that's the correct way to connect a dependent clause to an independent clause.
Wow! It was helpful to learn about independent and dependent clauses and the correct way to connect those two. Can you connect two independent clauses?
Connecting two independent clauses with commas, we can't do that. So let's look at some examples here. I teach English at Sunnyside High School. My students have trouble with correct use of commas. I teach English at Sunnyside High School is a complete thought. It is an independent clause. This example here is called a comma splice. You can't do this. And this is very, very common in student work. My students have trouble with the correct use of commas. That is an independent clause. So you've got to make some adjustments here. You have the choice. You can either add a period and make two sentences. I teach English at Sunnyside High School, period. My students have trouble with correct use of commas, period. Or you can create a compound sentence by adding a comma followed by a coordinating conjunction such as and, but, or, yet, or so. So I teach English at Sunnyside High School and my students have trouble with the correct use of commas. And make sure that when you add that coordinating conjunction that they put a comma before it.
Thank you for sharing how to join two independent clauses. Is there a checklist that you can share when writers are reviewing their essay for common punctuation errors?
Those are just a very few examples of errors that we commonly see in our students' work. So our punctuation checklist here is: have you checked the placement and use of apostrophes? Does an object belong to someone? Showing possession? Have you removed all contractions and spelled out the words? Have you checked your punctuation? Have you added a period, exclamation point, or question mark in all sentences? Have you written a dependent or independent clause? Do you need to join two clauses together with a comma or semicolon?
The Washington State PASS team thanks you for your time, and we hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget, check out our YouTube channel for other videos with helpful writing tips.